It was back, and can you imagine how far back this is? For most of you, it's ancient history. Back in 1950, I was a graduate student just enrolled at Harvard. And we attended alternative meetings with professors in anticipation of the courses or seminars that we would pursue. And I went to one of them in which a very distinguished professor of international politics was making the initial comments to candidates to take the course, and then abruptly announced that having made his initial comments of 3 to 5 minutes, he's now needed, most professors have that feeling that they are needed, in Washington to give advice. And he left. But before leaving, he said to us, and now my assistant will instruct you on what to expect. And in walks this youngish, somewhat rotund, but not badly so, scholar with a strong German accent, introduces himself and proceeds to tell us what to expect. And I listened to him carefully, and the more I heard, the more I sensed that the principal references were a variety of also Germanic philosophers who influence, in their own way, the evolution of history in Europe. And I somehow concluded that this is not my meat, that I will not be there. So I rather impolitely rose and left the room and did not enroll. Nonetheless, our paths thereafter crossed systematically and all the time. First at Harvard, and then more on the Washington political scene. At Harvard, we competed intellectually, but he was, of course, ahead. Then we both became involved in international politics. He first became associated with Nelson Rockefeller, a Republican, liberal Republican, hopefully a candidate for president, which he never became. But nonetheless, he was his advisor. Not long thereafter, I began to advise a young senator from Massachusetts called John Kennedy, and I began to give him advice on what to do. And then in the 1960s, Henry became involved with a new candidate for president, the former Vice President Nixon, a Republican also, and I became involved in advising a Democratic senator who wanted to be president until the night in which, after oscillating back and forth, President-elect Nixon prevailed. And I said to myself, well, Henry is a foreigner. I'm a foreigner by origin as well. So he'll probably be on his staff helping him, and that's very good because Nixon will learn more about the world and especially America. But much to my surprise, he became all of a sudden the National Security Advisor, the second most important position in the American government when it comes to foreign affairs. So I was duly impressed, very impressed. And I went to the nearest store that handles correspondence, papers, little booklets, and I bought myself a small little book. This, you must remember, is 1966. And I started writing in my book the names of those fellow Americans, somewhat younger than me, Democrats like me, who are interested in international politics. And I said to myself, this will be useful someday. And 10 years later, my entire staff in 1976, when I became National Security Advisor, was based on that notebook. And I had it in office 1 week before the president's inaugural, the only office in the White House which was fully operational. And the rest is history and my involvement in these affairs. So I look at this meeting with some sense of nostalgia. A lot binds us. We often disagreed, but more significantly, on the larger issues, agreed. Sometimes with different phases. Historically, he opened the doors to China, and that was very difficult and challenging. We walked through those doors and developed a more or less confidential security relationship with the Chinese that was of some importance, particularly in the Afghan war, and of some importance to this day in gaining mutually on an exchange basis relevant information as to what is happening in the Soviet Union in the area of special weaponry. So we go back a long time, and I'm delighted that we can celebrate the future by having a brief glance at the past here together. And I'm particularly pleased that Henry agreed to participate in this. It was originally going to be just me. I was then told that he was willing to come. I was asked very politely and nicely, do I accept or would I rather be alone? And I said, no, Henry will overshadow me, but it will enrich the event. And that is what is happening.